Everybody to the December 15th, 2020 Lane County Board of Commissioners meeting. We've got a full agenda today. We're going to start off with one of two time certains, and we will go straight into county administration, a public hearing and order on resolution on 20-12-15-01 in the matter of adopting the fiscal year 2021 supplemental budget number 2. Making, reducing, and transferring appropriations. And with us is Christine Moody, our budget and financial planning manager. Maybe. Is she on? Is Christine on?
She is. I do see her on.
Maybe she's having some audio issues this morning. I have a little bit more to read before she gets going. Should I read that, or should we make sure we've got audio first?
Why don't we read that and maybe go to public comment, and I will try contacting her on the side.
Okay, sounds good. So the first area that we're going to do is a summary by staff, and then we're going to move into the public hearing. So this is a public hearing on a supplemental budget for the current fiscal year budget as allowed under ORS 294.471 and ORS 294.473. This public hearing is required under ORS 294.473 due to one or more funds amending expenditures by more than 10% from current budgeted amounts. Notice that this hearing and summary of the changes was published in detail in the supplemental budget order and resolution included in this agenda item. Participants may testify for or against any item contained in the supplemental budget. And before I open the public hearing, we'll go back and see if Ms. Moody is able to get to audio.
Good morning. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Reached over to computer audio. I apologize for that. So thank you, Chair Buck, Commissioners. So I'll just give you a brief summary of this supplemental. It is fairly large in dollar size. It's about 53 million in resources that we're bringing into the county budget. A large piece of that is the fund balance carryover from the end of last year, about 32 million of that. We also have a few other areas I'll point out is we're bringing in some of the CARES Act coronavirus funds that are passing through the state, just over 6 million so far, that is being reimbursed as of the date that this supplemental was approved, or I'm sorry, it was prepared. And then that'll be a total of 19.9 over time. So just to give you an idea that there is more of that coming in. And then we also have some FTE additions that I'd like to point out to you related to the Holiday Farm fire. There's 0.5 FTE in our animal services related to providing that service with livestock. We also have emergency manager, recovery manager in emergency management that's being added 1 FTE. In economic development, we also have an FTE being added there to help with housing and economic issues to support residents there. On the COVID side of the EOC, you'll see 1 FTE for an incident commander in that EOC going forward. Some other large items are a transfer of just over $1 million to finish the renovations for Four Corners, the final funding for that, where the parole and probation office will move to. And then $1.1 million transfer from the general fund to our HSD, our Human Services Division, to help with some of the cash flow issues that occur with the CARES Act reimbursement, the way we're having to spend those funds and then apply to the state. So in total, there's 8.75 FTE being added to this supplemental, and the budget will total 853 million once this is approved. That's the end of my summary.
Very good, thank you. So at this point, we'll open the public hearing. And if you have public testimony, now's the time to raise your virtual hand. I'll turn this over to our moderator.
Thank you, Chair Buck. At this time, for this item only, this is for the supplemental budget number 2. If you have signed on for this meeting and would like to give public comment on this item, please raise your virtual hand. Chair Buck, I do not see anyone raising their hand, so I will turn the meeting back over to you.
Thank you. So we will close the public hearing. And now is time for any discussion and action by the board for this item. Are there any questions or comments before we make a motion? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Buck. I just have a couple of comments on small items on the supplemental budget. I won't talk about the, I'm not going to ask about the 32 million carryover. That's a normal event, I suspect and expect based on my experience. But regarding the Four Corners Parole and Probation, that's a facility that's in my district. And I just want a funny tongue in cheek. I drive by there at least one time nearly every day, usually more than one time. For the first time ever today, something really funny happened. There's a new gas station on the north and west corner of that intersection. The south and west corner is where we had considered a navigation center and low barrier shelter. Is being developed for something else. But for the first time today, as I stopped at the traffic light to turn left on under Roosevelt Avenue, a rat ran across the crosswalk. It waited for the walk signal. It's kind of a crazy thing. But the reason that was significant to me is I've never actually seen a wild rat in Bethel before. That was a first for me. And, you know, it's kind of interesting. I know about them in South Eugene quite a bit. It's been a problem there, but I don't know what we do about that. But just once again, first time I've ever seen that. But a very courteous rat waited for the traffic light to cross. The second thing I wanted to point out was the 0.5 FTE addition for animal services. I had a chance, Chair Buck, I had a chance to visit animal services or the fairgrounds when we were providing respite for the animals who were evacuated from the fire. And there's a great team effort going on out there. The Lane County was in conjunction with some 4-H were out there, a lot of volunteers. What I really wanted to point out was the sheriff's posse was there. We don't think much, we don't talk much about the sheriff's posse. They are a group of volunteers who do a great deal of work on the side that often is unnoticed. It's most frequently noticed during the fair when they park cars for us. But the sheriff's posse spent their own time helping with the large animals out of the fairgrounds. I just wanted to give a nod and a shout out to them at this point, Chair Buck. Other than that, I have no questions regarding this budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, is there a motion to approve the supplemental order and resolution as submitted?
So moved.
I think Sorensen was seconding, but I didn't hear audio. Yes, okay. Moved by Commissioner Burney, seconded by Commissioner Sorensen. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. So now we'll move on to what would normally be our regular agenda for the day. And for those that are in the audience, you are automatically muted until such time as there is public testimony or that there is public comment period. And we have a very tight agenda today. So as a reminder, if you are interested in doing public comment here in just a little bit, if there are more than those that we have time allotted for, we may have to reduce the number of minutes per person or choose a limited amount of speakers or randomly select some folks. So we haven't had to do that, but today is a very busy day. So it depends on how many people are interested in speaking. We will, at that time, turn it over to the moderator. And when you're ready for any public comment, you can click the virtual hand icon, and you'll have usually 3 minutes, depending on how many folks we have. And then when you're done with your 3 minutes, you will be automatically muted and you can watch as long as you'd like. So I'll move to item 2 on our agenda. Is there any adjustment to our agenda for today? Nope, no adjustments. Any emergency business? No emergency business. So we will move straight into public comment. So this is that time where you can raise your virtual hand and I'll turn it over to our moderator.
Thank you, Chair Buck. At this time, we will open the meeting to public comment. Please note this is for general public comment. We do have an item at 10 a.m. today. That is public comment regarding the OSU levy. So if you are logged on for that, this is not the public comment time for that. At this time, please raise your virtual hand if you have registered for general public comment, and I will call upon you. I do see, I will start with Kale Zuschlag. Kale, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Thank you, Chair Buck, Vice Chair Joe Burney, and County Commissioners and Steve. Thanks. You guys have heard me come, and thank you for your guys' hard work in pushing forward the community benefits agreement. And I want to thank you guys all again, Joe especially, for championing that. But I also wanted to come and show my appreciation today for your guys' staff who have just been really phenomenal in their efforts over the last couple months in their first pilot program with the community benefits bidding process. There's definitely been some bumps in the road, and your staff has really bought into doing this for the community. And it's something, you know, it's above and beyond what they would normally be doing. And it has been really impressive to see them tackle those challenges and try to move it forward for the community. And I just wanted to come and share my appreciation for them doing that. And that's it. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, is there anyone else who would like to give public comment now? If so, please raise your virtual hand. Chair Buck, I do not see any other hands raised, so I will turn this meeting back over to you.
Very good, thank you. Are there any commissioners' response or remonstrance at this time? Commissioner Sorensen.
Thanks very much. I just wanted to thank our public commenter this morning and want to urge the board to continue having public comments, not required by any law, but certainly by custom. It's something we do, and I'm really glad we do that. I just wanted to mention that today is my last scheduled meeting as a commissioner. Having been here for 24 years, it's both happy and sad. Happy because I won't be going to these Board of Commissioner meetings, but sad because I'll miss the opportunity to represent the people of my district and serve on the board. And I just wanted to thank everyone involved in this whole process, whether it's voters that voted me in or voters who didn't vote me in, but later voted me in, or voters that never voted me in, but I tried to help everyone in my district as best I could. And I really appreciate the opportunity to serve. I appreciated the support of my family over the many years, not only this job, but other positions as well. And I also wanted to thank every one of the commissioners for their service. You know, the public is not aware of just how hard the commissioners work. They don't see the long hours. And I know several commissioners that are currently on the board remember 7:30 a.m. Saturday meetings. And I said, this is my last scheduled board meeting, and it's possible we will have an emergency board meeting that we often will have at times when the weather's bad or there's a need for the board to do something. And I also wanted to say that I am a big fan of anthropologist Margaret Mead, and she's famous for saying a lot of things, but the one that I think is worth repeating here is sooner or later I'm going to die, but I'm not going to retire. And that's the way I feel about this day. I am retiring from the county and from the board and from my public service, but I'm not planning on retiring from life, and I've got plenty of things I hope to be doing in the future. And I just again wanted to thank staff, volunteers, commissioners present and past for the opportunity to serve. Thank you.
Commissioner Burney.
Commissioner Sorensen, I'm going to have some words to commemorate your work here at the end of the meeting, not now though. I would like to say, forgive me, this is about as close to boasting as I ever get. I would like to say that I lived for a week on the island of Bali in 1976 with Margaret Mead. And another one of her favorite quotes for me is, "Never doubt that a few people can change the world. In fact, it's the only way the world has ever changed." But those are personal stories and I won't indulge in those. I would like to both thank Cale Zuschlag, who's an officer of the Lane County Building Trades Association and of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 280. I'd like to remind, honestly, by the way, Cale has let me know each step of the way how much he's appreciated, because they were reticent too, the true partnership that has now evolved of trust and openness and solving problems together with our staff. So really hat off to Cale, but also a hat off to Sean and to Clay and to Mike and to Jim and to all those that have been and Greg and Steve, all those that have been so involved. I also want to remind this board that Cale was the sort of my go-to person as Commissioner Bozovich and I were out front attempting to generate resources to fund a campaign for a new Lane County Justice Center, and will be again at some point. And Cale helped us raise over $30,000 to support that. So we do have a partner in the trades. And Cale, I just want to thank you for acknowledging the appreciation. I think that's a class act and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other remonstrance or response? I'll just add that Commissioner Sorensen, because we want to honor you, we are going to invite you back to another board meeting in the beginning of the year to do so properly. So we appreciate all your work on the board for these past 24 years. And in order to honor that, we continue to invite you back to a board meeting. I thought you'd appreciate that. And I also want to thank Cale for all of his hard work in helping with the community benefits bidding process. I know that Commissioner Burney was our staunch champion, but so were you, Cale, and all the folks in the building trades that worked on that. So we look forward to seeing it roll out here with parole and probation and other projects. I saw Commissioner Farr's hand.
Thank you, Chair Buck. And I'm going to say a couple of words to Commissioner Sorensen. I will repeat them at what will be his actual final meeting. This is a final regular board meeting. And I'd given you a heads up on this, Commissioner Sorensen. In 1994, Bobby Green recruited me to replace him on the Eugene City Council. He'd been elected to the Board of County Commissioners to replace Jack Roberts, who had been elected to the Labor Commissioner back when the Labor Commissioner was a partisan position. Jack Roberts was elected and he subsequently changed that to a nonpartisan position. But when I accepted that position and I was appointed, Commissioner Sorensen was the first, then State Senator Sorensen was the first person to call me and congratulate me. I was standing at the very back of the Jerry store that we were building at the time. And And Commissioner Sorensen graciously, then Senator Sorensen graciously called me and gave me a heartfelt congratulations and said that he'd look forward to working with me. I think he and I had no idea how closely we would work for so many years. And I believe that our work together has not ended at this point in time, Commissioner Sorensen. Thank you for that call that day. Thank you for your service. And I will say more about you at the appropriate time after the first of the year.
Okay, any final comments? Okay, we'll move on to County Administration. Item 6A, our COVID-19 response and recovery. Mr. Mokreis.
Thank you, Chair. And we have Karen Gaffney here with us to provide an overview. And I know she's going to do an introduction of Steve Adams, and you get to meet our new incident commander. So I'll just go ahead and turn it over to Karen.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair Buck and commissioners. I will go ahead and start by asking, hopefully, Steve, he started yesterday, so we're still working on technology issues. So I'm hoping he can flip his camera on as well, so you have an opportunity to meet him. There we go. Steve is downstairs in our Emergency Operations Center. And I want to start by introducing him, and then I do have a few slides that I will share in a minute. But as you know, we have been activated in our Emergency Operations Center since March now, and we know that we have a good 6 to 9 month run ahead of us as we move through the next stages of the pandemic. So we agreed that it was time for there to be someone who could have full-time focus on our emergency response and return me to the role of Director of Health and Human Services. And I could not be more pleased than to introduce you to Steve Adams, who has answered that call for us. And as I said, he started yesterday at the county, and he will be joining you to provide these reports beginning in January, but wanted to make sure you had a chance to meet him now. So Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you introduce yourself a little bit, and then I'll run through a brief presentation as an update.
Hi, thank you, Director Gaffney and Chair Buck and Commissioners. It's a pleasure to join this incredible team that has been working hard. The morning incident briefing is underway here in the EOC. You'll probably hear the background noise. I'm very much looking forward to carrying on the work that Director Gaffney has so ably done, and look forward to working with you through the new year. I'm still very much drinking from the fire hose, as they say, in coming up to speed. But I must say that the work to date is quite impressive. And the team here is just really in awe of all the great work that's been done.
Right. Thank you so much, Steve. And I know, speaking of technology, I think I'm sharing my screen. Chair Buck, are you seeing my? Okay, people are excellent and seeing the correct screen. That's good. We've been around that bend a few times here for these updates. And I know you have a very full agenda today, so I am going to move quickly through these screens and provide enough opportunity for you to ask questions and for us to talk about whatever is most on your mind right now. And this initial screen is really a familiar slide for all of us. It's the summary of our plan to respond to COVID, and we are working our way through all 5 of these elements. Today I'm going to focus on number 1, containing the spread of disease, and then land on number 5 as we talk about vaccine. I know that's top of mind for many of us in the community right now. Here is our epi curve as of yesterday, and I will tell you that we continue to have extreme spread of COVID in the community. And I'll give you those specific numbers briefly, but just the picture alone, I think, shows you where we are at. We continue to have widespread disease and outbreaks really across the entire community. I will remind the public, if you're interested at any point in the specifics of data, you can look at that yourself on our website. We've arrayed the data by zip code. You can look at it for the last 2-week period. You can look at it by age, demographic, race, and ethnicity. What I will tell you is it is widespread and really across the whole community at this point. The metrics that the state uses for schools are also the same now as the metrics for general reopening. And I know we've discussed that at prior meetings. Here is where we are at as the last report dropped yesterday. For the 2-week period that ended December 12th, here in Lane County, and again, this is a 2-week period, we've seen almost 334 positive cases per 100,000 in Lane County. And I'm giving you the state data also just to help contextualize what we're seeing in Lane County. While it is absolutely widespread in our community, we are still running significantly below the state average for Oregon. And again, as always, I would call your attention to that positivity rate on the far right-hand side, knowing that our goal is to keep that positivity rate below 5%. That's one of the ways for us to judge whether we are doing sufficient amounts of testing in the community in order to pick up the spread of disease. So while we are still below that 5% mark, we are creeping up in our positivity rate. So both of those numbers are metrics that we track as well as the state tracks moving forward. So I think then the next question is, what are we going to do about that in addition to our attempts to work hard to contain the spread of disease? We continue to do disease investigation, contact tracing, isolation and quarantine, and what we know really is going to signal the beginning of the end of the pandemic is to get vaccines in people's arms. So our focus this week and moving into the future is very much in making sure that we have robust plans in our community that are coordinated with state and federal partners to make sure that as vaccine becomes available, we are getting it as quickly as possible into people's arms. You know, we talked some about the overall vaccine planning last week. I would remind the public about the phases that are set for us by the federal government and Project Warp Speed coming down through the Oregon Health Authority to us. So phase 1A is where we are focused right now, which are healthcare workers in hospitals, long-term care facilities, staff, and residents. We have our first meeting this week of our local advisory team for our vaccination effort. Again, I can't stress enough that our efforts are absolutely working to align with the policy decisions set by the state and federal government. So we do not have an opportunity locally to change the priority order, and we really will be working within the coordinated plan and guidance from the Oregon Health Authority. We have met with our partners at McKinsey-Willamette and at Peace Health, and they have solid plans ready to roll as soon as that vaccine hits Lane County to begin to get it into the arms of hospital healthcare workers. And those are the populations where they will begin first. And they have prioritized those staff who are most critical and most likely to be exposed to COVID. So looking at emergency departments and COVID care units as the place to start, and then moving out as additional supplies of vaccine become available. And our work then is to make sure that at Public Health, we've completed a gap analysis for that healthcare worker population outside of hospitals. So we are working with our primary care partners and other clinical partners to make sure they have all registered for their own supply of vaccine and have their own plans to be able to vaccinate employees as soon as that supply becomes available. And then, of course, at Public Health, making sure where there are gaps that we can step into that space and make sure each of these populations is fully vaccinated as we move through. We have made contact with CVS and Walgreens, which are the national pharmacy chains that have been identified by the federal government as partners to be able to do the vaccination in long-term care facilities, skilled nursing facilities, and others. So again, our role at local public health for this phase 1A is to make sure we're tracking on any gaps in those systems and mobilizing to make sure that those get filled and addressed. And then as we move into January and then further into the spring, we'll be able to work our way down this list, expecting, again, more clear guidance from our state partners of priorities within each of those sub-phases. And I think maybe that's where I'll stop for today and preserve as much time as possible for any questions that the board might have or discussion. So Chair Buck, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. Any questions? Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gaffney. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for the double duty you've been doing of being the contact person on this coronavirus pandemic, as well as running the largest department at Lane County government. And I think it's also worth noting that it's good leadership, executive leadership, to have Mr. Mokrajewski make the encouragement to you to get someone to succeed you in one of those two roles, and welcome Mr. Adams for your, you've got an excellent background. I appreciate the news release that we received from the county regarding your appointment, and I'm really glad you're on the job. Got an excellent background. Ms. Gaffney, I just have one question about really all of this in terms of our response, and that is there anything that the Lane County Board of Commissioners or Lane County Board of Health could do to minimize the number of people that are going to die from this disease over the next few months?
Thank you, Chair Buck. Commissioner Sorensen, I appreciate that question, and I think you're right. We each have our own roles in being able to contain the spread. I would say the board has really done an excellent job of ensuring that there are resources going to our emergency response and prioritizing on both your agendas and many of you personally in the ways you have been supporting communication out into the community to be able to encourage people to do what they individually need to do in terms of battling the pandemic. What we know at this point is that we have good logistical plans in place around getting the vaccine in people's arms. As we get further into it, we may identify additional places where we need help and support from the board in terms of resources or policy. And I think if that surfaces, that certainly we will come back to the board. I would say as far as policy goes, Oregon has been very lucky to have the leadership we have from our governor, who has set statewide policies that allow for clear swim lanes, for lack of a better word, clear guidance for the public about what needs to happen in our communities in order to support the containment of disease. We are part of a global pandemic, and certainly nationally, the numbers have been really horrible, and we've had significant loss of life. What we know in our community is our most vulnerable populations are those who are in long-term care facilities, congregate settings, and people with underlying health conditions. So I think as we move forward, our focus continues to be on how do we protect hospitals, make sure that they have the PPE they need and the staffing levels that they need, and how do we make sure that as much as possible people are getting the message about the individual actions they need to take to prevent the spread of disease. So I know we've talked a lot with the board about where we've seen spread happening in terms of workplaces, individual gatherings, and many of you individually have taken on a role either in social media or other opportunities to really be clear with your constituents about what we need from them. And I appreciate that significantly. So thank you, and appreciate that action from the board.
Any other comments? Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you, Chair Buck. Karen, as we're trying to deal with this winter surge in cases, I've been concerned about how we've been handling this and with the restrictions. And I have a question. Do we know how often the staff for long-term and group care facilities are being tested? How often they're being tested?
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich and Chair Buck. It depends a little bit on the facility. If we have facilities where we have active outbreaks, then testing happens more frequently to make sure that we identify those cases, and that can be oftentimes twice a week to be able to do that. In general, the standard set by the state for long-term care facilities was to be able to make sure, and I'm going off my memory, so I might need to confirm this and I can get back to the board, that they do 25% of their staff each week so that everyone would be tested at least monthly if they don't have active outbreaks going on at their facility. And again, as they have cases, then they're testing more frequently.
See, that really upsets me because the demographics of this disease are clear that there's a much higher risk to our elder population and folks that have compromised immune systems and other medical conditions, which are the residents of these facilities. We test the U of O football team, every member at least once a week. And they're in a demographic where we haven't had a single fatality in this county. And we're only testing our workers that are exposing this extremely vulnerable and high mortality population, only a quarter of them every week, which means they're getting a test once every 4 weeks. Yet we can test the entire U of O football team once a week. Something is wrong with this picture. We're closing gyms down when we don't have any contact tracing that shows a gym's been an outbreak. But we're not taking care of our most vulnerable population where we're seeing the fatalities. I'm just so angry with how I'm witnessing the state roll out their new restrictions and how they're deploying resources to fight this disease right now, because it doesn't seem to be based on science.
Thank you, Chair Buck and Commissioner Bozievich. I appreciate that piece, and I want to amend my answer a little bit. As I said, it depends on the facility. And I think it's important to be clear for the public when we say we are testing, who the we is. So for the University of Oregon Athletic Department, the Pac-12 has provided testing for all of their member institutions. So I wouldn't want anyone in the community to think that Lane County Public Health is diverting its resources to prioritize testing for athletes at the University of Oregon. That's not the case. They're the Pac-12 and the University of Oregon and all of their member institutions have arranged for rapid testing with their resources. So speaking of rapid testing, I think it's also, and I totally hear your point about the need for having those same resources available in long-term care facilities. And I know that as the Binex Now tests came to Oregon, those were deployed in a number of places. And so I believe there are some long-term care facilities that are using those. So what I cited was kind of the bare minimum expectation for long-term care facilities. And what I would like to do is be able to get an updated answer of what many of our facilities are actually doing, because I think that it's significantly more than the bare minimum, and get you that answer. And the other reality is we have cases in so many of our long-term care facilities that they are absolutely testing more frequently given how widespread disease is. But let me get you a better answer to that, Commissioner.
Yeah, I just want to make clear though that the Pac-12 providing the university is under the control of the state. The state could redirect resources away from the U of O football team into our critical elderly care facilities. They could have been doing this all along this fall, so we don't have these outbreaks happening now that are requiring additional testing. It still just flabbergasts me how unscientific the resources have been distributed to fight this disease, how unscientific the restrictions have been and continue to be, because it is a serious disease. I completely agree. I mask up, I wash my hands, I limit my contact, and I am planning on getting the vaccine when it's available to my age group and demographic. So, I wish we would follow science. And it seems like we are not, and we are causing other problems in our society by not following it, economic issues. At the same time, we're allowing the exposure of our most vulnerable population by not switching resources from maintaining a football schedule to protecting our elderly.
Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Chair. Karen, are we still considered by the state to be in the extreme risk group?
Chair Buck and Vice Chair Burney, yes, we are absolutely still in the extreme. Anything above 200 is considered in the extreme.
Gotcha. And yet, from the maps I see across the country, Oregon is doing as good as any state in the country, better than most as it relates to this horrific experience and epic we are living through. Lane County is doing better than the state of Oregon. So I appreciate the metrics, but if that's extreme, it doesn't leave much room for getting in a different category. I know you don't, no one has a crystal ball, but what do you speculate might be a time frame where we even have a shot at getting into a lesser category with a few lesser restrictions imposed?
Thank you, Chair Buck and Vice Chair Burney. I am hopeful that we will alter our behavior around Christmas and holidays that are coming. That's what it will take. I think that, we know what the public health measures are that make a difference in terms of spread of disease, and hand washing and mask wearing we've been talking about for a long time. And social gatherings are really critical for us right now, particularly as things are moving indoors, that what it will take is for people to embrace the fact that holiday celebrations this December cannot be the same as they have always been. So if people make those choices, then we can see that flattening of the curve and begin to bring transmission down. But frankly, that's what it's going to take, is for people to be willing to forego those gatherings and not be together in groups outside of their household. And if we can do that, to the extent that we do that, then in a matter of weeks, we can start to see the numbers decline. There is a delay, of course, because of the incubation period, so it's not instant. But if we don't choose to do that, and we see another bump on top of our high levels coming out of the rest of this year, January is going to be really hard in our community. So that's what we're looking at, is the choices that people make this week and next week will absolutely have an impact on what January looks like for our businesses, for our schools, for our hospitals, and moving into the future. So that's the choice we need people to make right now, knowing that in the next few months, we will get vaccine and the numbers will start to come down as we gain immunity. But people need to make that hard choice right now for this month.
Thank you. And just one comment, if I may, and that is that everyone, no matter what their perspective, my opinion, is sick and tired and exhausted and frustrated with COVID-19 and its imposition on our life. I think that we all want to see our children and grandchildren in school, learning, playing, socializing. I see it directly. I know many of us do, and our entire community does. We need to see restaurants and gyms open for our mental health, and we have to get there. So while I share a couple of Commissioner Bozovich's frustrations, and I also share with him an adherence to personally behaving in a way that as I can and advancing that with my circles, I feel that this time is also a time where we're going to see frustrations rise, and we're going to have to be about as calming an influence and focusing an influence on what needs to occur outwardly, while privately take every opportunity to try and right or hone in to be more correct these decisions that are being made outside of our community for our community. So thank you very much, Karen, and thank you very much, Chair Buck.
I have a question about the vaccine supply and supply chain. We all, of course, heard that our first doses arrived in the state. I'm curious how many that was and how you foresee the supply chain stability, as well as the rollout of counts of vaccines to not only Oregon, but for Lane County.
Thank you, Chair Buck. And, you know, I saw in an email yesterday how many doses arrived, and I don't remember off the top of my head. So I don't know if Steve knows, he should feel free to chime in, but we can certainly get you that number, but I don't recall it off the top of my head. And so your other question was about the supply chain and how we're managing that piece. Is that right? Okay. So again, the vaccine that has been approved so far is certainly demanding in terms of cold storage. And so those are shipping directly to hospitals who have the capacity to provide those freezers. In reality, while the faucet has turned on, it's certainly not a full blast. So we're not talking about needing to store vaccines very long. The truth is, as they're arriving, the focus is really on getting them mixed and getting them into people's arms. So we don't need lots of cold storage. We need to be able to keep that vaccine cold while it travels to its final destination. And between freezers that hospitals currently have, some that are provided in communities, Steve and I have been talking with the University of Oregon. So they're part of a larger statewide system that's able to help support the state's effort in providing those cold storage resources. The supply seems to be moving according to plan. So those are direct shipments then to the hospitals or to the pharmacies that will be responsible for vaccinating people. Once we get to healthcare workers who are not hospital-based, so those primary care clinics and other healthcare workers, the plan from the state is to continue to direct ship those to those providers and clinics. So again, that should be much faster to have the direct supply using FedEx and UPS. So it won't come to Lane County and then Lane County have to further transport it. It will go directly to those clinics. And we expect that will shift as we then get far enough down the list that we're talking about doing general vaccinations. Then, you know, I think we'll see more of the supply coming to the county to then help disperse to those who will be doing pop-up clinics and drive-through clinics and other strategies for getting that in people's arms. I don't know, Chair Buck, if that answered your question.
It does slightly. I actually feel like my question was more on a national level for those that are supplying vaccines, do they have everything that they need to continue that ongoing steady supply of vaccines so that we then see that come down to the county level? I feel like there could be concerns if there's something that needs to be mixed into those vaccines and an ingredient that we can't get. I know that that was an issue for testing in and of itself.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Buck. Yes, I think that's a very, I don't know in terms of specific ingredients like the testing reagents, but I think the general manufacturing supply chain, clearly there's worldwide demand for these vaccines. And so the United States is only one country that is ordering vaccines. So the more vaccines that are approved for emergency use, then that will help the supply. The FDA is scheduled to meet this week, and we anticipate that a second vaccine will be approved and added to the list. There are others in the pipeline. So the more manufacturers who are approved, then that will ease the supply issues. Certainly, there are constraints to how quickly those can be manufactured. So that's a piece of why we're going to see this paced over the next 6 to 9 months, rather than a huge drop shipment all at once. Is they were able to begin manufacturing prior to approval, so they do have some supplies that are able to ship immediately, but that manufacturing needs to continue. And I don't know, Steve, if you had anything you wanted to add. I saw you sit up toward the microphone, so do you have anything you want to add?
Thank you, Director Gaffney, Chair Buck, Commissioners. So Oregon is expecting 35,100 doses this week. The first of those doses arrived at 3 facilities yesterday and 975 dose packages via the direct shipment. And then as part of the process, facilities that are receiving vaccine are also receiving from a separate vendor vaccine supply kits, which include PPE and other equipment required to administer the vaccines.
Thank you. That was helpful. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Ms. Gaffney, for the report. Steve, welcome to the team, and I wish you Godspeed and good luck in your work in the upcoming days, weeks, and months. We'll all be helping you as much as we can. And Ms. Gaffney, it's going to be a little bit of a relief, I think, for you to be able to return to some of your regular duties, or a little bit more directly to some of your regular duties, none of which have been derelicted while you've been spending so much time on COVID-19. This week seems to be a week for hope. A lot of people are reporting that. And Steve, I read the article in the Register Guard this morning regarding the distribution in Oregon. And notably, Multnomah County is, of course, getting the first distribution. They received doses yesterday, and we're waiting still. That is kind of the normal process for things in Oregon, is that Multnomah County gets and everybody else waits. That's nothing of our doing by any stretch of the imagination. But it also reported that hospital facilities, notably Peace Health and Mackenzie Willamette, will be receiving 975 doses along with other accredited facilities. Can you give me just a brief on who those other accredited facilities are beyond Mackenzie Willamette and Peace Health?
So this is where it's hard that Steve and I aren't in the same room. So maybe I'll start and then you can fill in behind me if there's additional information. So in terms of our Lane County, the pharmacies are the other, Walgreens and CVS are the other entities that are on deck to receive supplies of the Pfizer vaccine at this point. So those have been enrolled in the state system and are prepared as part of phase 1A distribution. As we move down to phase 1B, then we also have been enrolling primary care clinics. There's the host of healthcare providers who are also enrolled and prepared. They likely will not receive the Pfizer vaccine. My guess is they will likely get the Moderna vaccine if that's approved for emergency use, just because of the unique issues with storage around Pfizer. So I don't know, Steve, did you want to add anything else?
Thank you, Ms. Gaffney, and thank you, Steve. The article today, which I presume is correct, although the Register Guard tends to run a little bit behind frontline news, says that Oregon's total vaccine allotment between now and the end of the year could be as many as 228,000 doses, which is not a lot, but it certainly is a start. Well, Ms. Gaffney, I wanted to mention this, that you and your staff are exceeding all reasonable expectations in your response, in your direction, and in your public involvement. So I want to thank you for the work that you have done and commend you for the remarkable work that the staff in your departments are doing. So I am pleased to be a small part of it. But once again, Steve, I wish you Godspeed and good luck in the weeks, days, and months to come.
Thank you, Chair Buck and Commissioner Farr, and I will absolutely pass that along to the team. I will tell you, it means a lot to the many people, county staff, who are working very hard 7 days a week on this to hear that appreciation, and I will absolutely pass that along.
Well, thank you very much. We've kind of hit our time limit for this subject to keep our agenda moving. Thank you very much, and we'll see you in the new year. Vice Chair Bernie, was that a hand for a question or just a hand wave goodbye?
I apologize, Chair Buck. That was a hand wave goodbye.
Okay. We'll keep moving on our agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Is there a second? I think a thumbs up from Commissioner Sorensen is a second. So moved by Commissioner Bernie, second by Commissioner Sorensen. Any discussion? See no discussion, so I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. All right, we're staying on track. This is great. We're moving on to item 8A of our agenda, which is a 10 a.m. time certain public comment for proposed OSU Extension Service property tax levy. And I see that Judy Williams, our strategy and integration manager, has popped on the screen. Now I can only see 6 people at a time. So if there are more people, feel free to introduce them. And just a reminder to the audience that's watching and our board that there were a decent amount of written submissions and public comment that you can see attached to the agenda. And I'll turn it over to Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Chair Buck and Commissioners. Judy Williams, our Strategy and Integration Manager. I do also have available, if there's questions, Jillian Drews and Richard Riggs available with OSU Extension Service. So I'm just going to briefly introduce the topic before you, and then I really do want to allow time for public comments. And so the item that you have in front of you is a public comment section. So as you know, there is an existing OSU property tax levy currently. It's for the Extension Service and 4-H, and that is a 5-year levy that sunsets in 2021. And so before you, December 8th, last week, you were presented a proposal from OSU Extension Service, and this is the public comment portion to hear what the public thinks about the proposal and to hear feedback. You have a series of additional events scheduled in your calendar for January and February if you were to move forward in the process. There's several statutory timelines that we really need to follow if you do, again, refer this to the ballot. So this is one step in a series of some additional steps to consider that. So again, your role as the board is to review that, and you do have that authority to refer such a revenue question to the ballot. My role, again, is just really a liaison to help OSU Extension Service get through some of the board processes, and as a liaison to some of our staff here at the county. So we also just wanted to let you know, we have next session, January 26th, where the board can hear more issues and have a little bit more time for a discussion. So if we don't get to all of that today, just know that you have the 26th for additional time for this. With that, I will go ahead and turn it back over to you, Chair, to set the public session, public comment.
Thank you very much. So at this time, we'll take comments from the public regarding the proposed OSU 4-H Extension Service 5-year local option levy for operations and capital in the amount of 2.8 cents per $1,000 assessed value to be placed on the May 2021 ballot. So at this time, if you're interested in giving public comment on this particular item, please raise your virtual hand at this time so we can gauge how many folks are interested in speaking. We have only 30 minutes scheduled in our agenda for this item. So if we need to make adjustments to the time allowed to speak, we'll do our best to gauge that after we see all the hands raised. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator to walk through public comment. And first, we'll determine how many speakers we have and if we need to adjust the time per speaker.
Thank you, Chair Buck. At this time, if you have signed up to speak during this public comment session, please raise your virtual hand. Please only press the button one time because it is a toggle and your hand will go down if you press it again. Once I see how many hands we have, we can determine the amount of time allocated for each speaker. So if you would please raise your hand now, I would greatly appreciate it. At this time, I see 2 hands raised. I see Sandra Langen and Alexander Gregory. If anyone else would like to speak, please raise your hand now. There we go. It looks like I see about 5 hands raised, except I see them going down. I also see Megan Davis, Mary Bradley. So I'm going to begin calling on people to speak. I think we will go with the 3 minutes for each person. Our first speaker will be Sandra Langen. Sandra, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Hello, my name is Sandra Langen, and I've been in 4-H for 8 years and a Lane County ambassador for 6. And I'm here to tell you what 4-H means to me. Through the programs provided, I have learned to share, teach, grow, and push out of my comfort zone. Before this, I would have never been able to speak in front of this kind of board. And I have had opportunities to present and lead events. This program is something I would like for the community to have, for it creates leaders and inspires change. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker will be Mary Bradley, followed by Alexander Gregory. Mary, let me reset the timer and you may begin your public comment. Whoop. Mary, I do show you're self-muted.
That okay?
There you go. Yes.
All right, good. Thank you. This coming year marks Grassroots Garden's 30th anniversary. Grassroots is a partnership of Food for Lane County, St. Thomas Episcopal Church, and Lane County OSU Master Gardeners. Staff at Grassroots regularly consult with and get advice from OSU Extension on our fruit and vegetable production and maintenance. We find them extremely valuable in helping us hunt down answers to questions and concerns about disease and pests that, even after nearly 30 years, still arise and daunt us. At Grassroots, Master Gardeners teach seed to supper courses. This free 6-week class teaches full spectrum gardening practices to people on a budget in a small and supportive setting. Master Gardeners give public demonstrations at Grassroots, including compost and pruning demos, weed and herb walks, and in our adaptive and educational garden, in the Gratitude Flower Garden, and in our herb garden. They've offered pollinator tours. They help maintain and tend our worm bins, mason beans, specialty gardens, berry patches, and orchards. In the garden, MGs teach individuals and groups while working alongside people of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds, from pre-K to elementary, middle school, and high school classes through. Together, we also work with homeschool families and alternative high school groups like Network Charter School, as well as coordinated youth and adults, faith-based and corporate groups, individuals from the community, and retirees. Usually about 2,500 different people spend 30,000 hours with us each year. Together, we also teach garden participants to cook, eat, and enjoy the fresh fruits and vegetables from the garden utilizing our outdoor kitchen. In our kitchen, we prepare and serve a full spectrum lunch each day to all garden participants. We also teach people to preserve and put up crops for the winter. Many of us now eat so much fast food and processed food, to eat freshly prepared food can taste weird. We're endeavoring to re-educate people's taste buds, one person at a time. We feel if you don't eat the fresh food from the garden, why grow it? Not only do OSU Lane County Extension Master Gardeners help us teach all of this, but through our Learn by Doing, Each One Teach One method, we're inadvertently creating garden educators who can carry this information and their new abilities into their lives and pass it on. Also, anyone who's involved in grassroots is invited to share the harvest. Therefore, we really are teaching those who come to the garden to grow food for themselves and others. Typically, grassroots grows between 50 to 70,000 pounds of fresh organic.
Thank you for your public comment.
Thank you. Is it possible? I've got literally about 45 more seconds. Could I go ahead and give that?
We are limited to 3 minutes. I apologize.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Alexander Gregory. Alexander, I will unmute you and you may begin your public comment.
Hello, mic check. Okay, I'd like to give you just a little perspective on the long-term ramifications of the Master Garden OSU Extension programming opportunities in Lane County. In 2016, I was working in an illegal cannabis farm, and I was stuck there. I didn't have any opportunities. I entered the Master Gardener program, completing the training in 2017, becoming a mentor in 2018. At that time, I was then invited to run and operate a controlled environment agriculture facility for the University of Oregon, where I was using my skills gained in an illicit manner to teach incoming freshmen about how to grow vegetables, how to work an LED light system, how to build environmental controls. From there, in no certain terms, it was told that when I applied to the Oregon State University Master's Horticultural Program, it was my connections through the Master Gardener program. It was those references that got me my current graduate student position. Now, I am currently working to support Oregon's rapidly expanding cannabis, hemp, and blueberry production, where I am supporting research, doing extension outreach, giving talks, and I am currently in a position to become a lifelong horticultural researcher and potentially even an extension agent. None of this would have been possible if I had not been able to attend the Master Gardener program, if I had not been able to engage with my community through the different Master Gardener events and workshops. Growing blueberries, they're not up to full production until 7 years after they're planted. So maintaining the this network, this framework, which people can use to learn more about agriculture, which supports not only small home gardens, but small and large farms in Oregon's, well, still very agriculturally based economy. The return on investment for me personally has been staggering. And while it is difficult to quantify how much these programs are benefiting the community in the long term, I can speak from personal experience that being a former illicit cannabis grower, now moving into OSU-funded research to support legitimate agricultural commodities in the state of Oregon. This tax levy is the only thing that made that possible. And, you know, I would still be watering plants just deep in the forest, hauling water in the back of a truck. So I would say, in summary, that the return on investment for Oregon's agricultural industry from this levy, while difficult to quantify, is huge. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker is Megan Davis. Megan, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. Megan, we can hear you.
There we go. Hi, my name is Megan Davis, and I'm here to tell you about how 4-H has impacted my life and what it means to me. I've been 4-H for 5 years now, and made leadership for 4, and it's shaped me to who I am today. If it wasn't for 4-H, I would still be a shy and not outgoing person. Though due to 4-H, I am able to speak to a large group of people and share my love for 4-H with the general public. 4-H has done so much for me, and I'm thankful for it. Since 4-H has became a large part of my life, it means a lot to me. I'm the 3rd generation of 4-Hers in my family, so it kind of means more to me than it does some people. I'm so lucky to be a part of this amazing organization. I don't know where I'd be or who I would be without this amazing organization. That's all I have.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, I do not show any additional hands are raised. I just saw one go up. Stephen Oldfeld, I will reset the timer and you may unmute you and you may begin your public comment.
Thank you. My name is Stephen Oldfield and I live in Veneta. For me, the Master Gardener program means education and community. Remember the spring, when vegetable seeds were selling out so fast you had to drive down to Territorial to find beans. That's when Google was trending on growing vegetables from scraps. Now, that might be fun as a YouTube video, but I've never heard of anyone feeding a family that way. There's no shortage of information out there. It's just not all relevant or reliable. Seed to supper classes are a way to improve household food security. You heard a little about them with Master Gardeners and with Food for Lane County. We had to cancel in 2020, but in 2021, we'll have remote learning tools. Extension made up for that with a free vegetable course in April, and that got thousands of views, and it filled some of the education gap. We also filled some cars with vegetable starts, and they were shipped out into the community. In 2020 then, lawns were looking tidier, and there was a lot more gardening going on. And there are physical, nutritional, mental benefits to a garden. But there are even more benefits when you have access to the education and the support to help it grow. Particularly if that information is research-based and reflects the local growing conditions. In 2020, the Plant Clinic has developed ways to respond to clients remotely. And you can see publicly the statistics for classes given, seminars presented, questions answered, and hours volunteered. Doing that remotely, I think, is one of the rare bright spots of this year. That and the number of people in the community who are now actively gardening. Looking around the neighborhood right now, you can see new raised beds. The pea trellises are empty and the compost piles are full. Annuals have produced, but fruit trees and bushes are just getting their roots down. With the right guidance, there's a lifetime of cultivation ahead for those gardeners. Over 100 people joined our virtual fall festival in October. They couldn't come to taste apple juice, so they came to hear about cover crops to safeguard their soil, about composting for soil improvement, saving seeds for next year's crop, and food preservation for the produce they were still harvesting. Our neighbors are already on this gardening journey, and with the right educational resources, it's one that we can take together for a more resilient community. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. We do have one more person who has raised their hand, Jean Sperry. I will reset the timer and unmute your microphone, and you may begin your public comment.
Thank you. I am Jean Sperry. I'm Health and Nutrition Specialist at Head Start of Lane County. We have worked extensively with the nutrition team through extension for our vulnerable families. We serve families that are poverty level and below, and 30% of the component of the Part Day program for these children is mealtime. And in order to get these families and children ready for a full experience in elementary school, we need to remove health barriers. And as you know, food and healthy eating is essential to removing health barriers that can slow kids down as they go through their education. I would like to read to you, I have a statement here. This is from Caroline Weber, and Caroline Weber is the food manager for Head Start of Lane County. We serve about 1,000 families all over Lane County of all sorts. Carolyn has some strong feelings on this too. And in answer to the question posed, why would you value the OSU Extension Service and the impact it has had on your life, community, and work? Carolyn answers, I experienced my first nutrition education related work through OSU Extension. The background and skills I gained as a nutrition education intern gave me the confidence that community nutrition was the right fit for my dietetic career. In that position, I was able to share a wide variety of nutrition concepts with diverse audiences, such as Child Care Center, Independent Living Facility, Youth Build, Food Pantries, WIC, and more. These serve to strengthen my ability to apply my knowledge. The Head Start program I work for has collaborated with OSU Extension to provide learning opportunities for our families that would not be possible without them. Prior to the pandemic, our families participated in a Cooking Matters class, which received high positive feedback. During the pandemic, we are continuing to offer families opportunities through the OSU Extension virtual classes. Nutrition knowledge and the self-efficacy is a vital component for the families we serve who are income less than or equal to 100% of the federal poverty level, including pregnant women, 0 to 5-year-olds. The Food Hero, kid-approved, budget-friendly, and healthy recipes meet our families' needs in a perfect way. I utilize Food Hero for cooking projects in the classroom, as well as one-on-one and group nutrition education for families. And I guess, again, as Jean Sperry, I would just like to reiterate how important the Food Hero and the extension classes have been for our families. As you know, new generations don't know how to cook the way some of our old generations do. And by teaching these young families the basics of food, the basics of cooking, the basics of providing a healthy diet. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Buck, at this time, I do not see any additional hands raised for public comment. I will turn the meeting back over to you.
All right, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to hear all those public testimonies and support. So at this point, Ms. Williams, is there any additional information for this item?
There is not at this time. We will have further discussion scheduled again, like I said, January 26th, and we can talk about, in particular, the conversation around voter pamphlet or voter guide and any kind of mechanism if you were interested in terms of getting information out to the public, as the voter pamphlet is not required in the odd year election. So we can have that further discussion on the 26th. So that's all that we have today.
Very good. Thank you very much. We'll move on to our next item on the agenda, which is the Holiday Farm Fire update. And with us will be Mr. Mokrowski, our County Administrator, and Dan Hurley, our Public Works Director.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over. Danny, there. Do we have Dan?
I am checking.
We could come back to this particular item if need be.
Yeah, why don't we do that, Chair? Why don't we go on and we'll track Dan down and get him here for the update.
Very good. So we'll come back to our farm fire update in a little bit, and we'll move on to our two items under the Sheriff's Office. So item A is a, excuse me, a resolution and order 20-12-15-06 in the matter of accepting a 3-year comprehensive opioid stimulant and substance abuse site-based program grant award through the Bureau of Justice Assistance, the amount of $900,000 for the Lane County Jail Substance Use Intervention and Transition Program, delegating authority to the county administrator to execute the award documents and associated subcontracts, and increasing the fiscal year 2021 appropriations in the Special Revenue Fund within the Department of Public Safety in the amount of $300,000. And with us will be Captain Clint Riley and Lieutenant Gregory Rice.
Good morning. Thanks for having us. Give you a little bit of an overview of exactly what this grant's going to entail. Clint Riley, I'm the jail commander here with the Lane County Sheriff's Office, and I'm here with Lieutenant Greg Rice. The grant funds will be used to provide substance abuse counseling, medicated assisted treatment, which is referred to as a MAT program, and recovery for supports to adults while in custody at the Lane County Jail, with a warm handoff to community partners upon release. The funds have been budgeted to add 1.25 FTE for a licensed practical nurse with WellPath to provide nursing services to opioid-dependent inmates while incarcerated here at the jail. To contract with a provider for peer support, to liaison between participants and community recovery support services, and to contract for transitional housing for placement once released from custody. WellPath will purchase the medications necessary to administer the MAT program and a medical director prescriber through WellPath. The goals of the program are to improve treatment options for adults while they're in custody at the Lane County Jail who have substance use disorders, establish and expand connections to community-based services for adults in custody who have substance abuse disorders, and reduce recidivism rates for adults in custody who have these substance abuse disorders. The program will focus on those that have 2 or more jail bookings in 1 year, where the crime or the charge was a result of substance use or disorder. Typically, you see property crimes as an example of someone that has drug addiction disorder. The program service targets are to engage 20 people a month with MAT services and up to 100 people a month with education and counseling by a certified drug and alcohol counselor. The program will have an entry point for anyone along the spectrum of addiction, regardless of their term of stay in jail. Activities will range from promoting education on MAT, counseling on MAT options, to initiating and sustaining participants in their MAT program, medication and behavioral therapy. Since many are in jail for only a short period of time, we anticipate contact with the CADC, which is our certified drug and alcohol counselor, to be primarily the inroad to MAT engagement. By primarily partnering with Lane County Health and Human Services, individuals who are enrolled in a MAT program can remain on the program within the jail, and any individual who enrolls in the MAT program within the jail will be able to continue the program with Health and Human Services or other community providers upon their release from jail. The current jail medical provider, WellPath, is able to dispense medication to individuals enrolled in MAT and is equipped to scale up and provide the medical, mental health, and substance abuse counseling requirements for a MAT program. One thing that's unique that I just want to point out with our MAP program, I've been here at the Lane County Sheriff's Office for 25 years, and I've worked in a lot of programs. And typically our programs are based on someone having 6 months in jail, being minimum custody, living in a dormitory setting, and getting services. And we're missing a big population of our people when we target it like that. And our program here is to engage anybody upon entry into the jail, whether they're here for 24 hours or for 6 months. We're able to bring these services to them and try to help those people that need help with their drug addiction. So we've kind of turned this upside down, and we're not just targeting really well-behaved folks that are in jail and those that are in jail. You shouldn't have to go to jail for 6 months to get counseling and to get help. So this is a unique approach to try to reach out and engage people that don't typically engage with. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions from commissioners? Well, I think it's a great grant, so I'm supportive. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Buck, and thank you, Captain Riley, for the great report. It really was. I listened to every single word, and there's a good description also in the agenda packet for anyone who's watching at home or online can read our agenda and get a good descriptor of something that you described, Captain Riley, and that is the fact that you are trying to reach every single person who enters the jail in order to provide them services that they potentially are not going to get elsewhere. It's a pretty stellar work that is done by the jail staff and by the Sheriff's Department. As we, you know, one of the main things that you talk about quite often, and the Sheriff talks about also, is diversion from jail, getting people into treatment instead of going to jail. Sometimes people go to jail instead of treatment, and being able to provide the treatment in jail is just a great step along the way to bringing people back to normal lives on the street. So thank you for that hard work. I'd like to also point out, Captain Riley, that you are inhibited in your in all of your health provision by the fact that inmates are not granted Medicaid benefits, that Lane County and the Sheriff's Department have to pay for the medical treatment for all inmates, whether it be mental health or physical health. At AOC's health steering committee meeting yesterday, we forwarded what may ultimately become relief for that. We're working on getting Medicaid for jail inmates. And thank you for your work on that front also, Captain Riley. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you. Captain Riley, I wanted you to address an issue that has been over some period of time. I remember back in the 90s, particularly when Oregon enacted the Measure 11, 1994, that there was an effort to get tough on crime, and then over a period of time leading up to present, there's been more of a recognition that many people that do commit crimes do so because of mental illness or because of substance abuse. In your career, what was the turning point, do you think, in this transition?
For me personally, I agree 100%. I worked here and I worked in a prison before I moved to Arizona. So I've been in corrections for over 30 years, started as a very young man, and I've been at this a while. And when I went to work here in the Lane County Jail, after a few years of watching those folks that booked in and out and came through here a lot, and then seeing folks that would come in and out, and then see them get sentenced to prison for 10 years and see the evolution of felony crimes and how that impacted particularly people that are drug addicted. That's when it came full circle for me that mental health disorders and drug addiction, over 90% of the people that come in through this system have some sort of addiction disorder or mental health disorder that drives their criminality. I don't have any raw data to share with you, but just my experiences. I think you take the addiction piece out, or you treat someone for their mental health disorder, and I think jail populations get smaller. I think the program we have here is where you start. You try to get somebody to make some life decisions and choices and get them off of get them off drugs, I think the criminality goes away, particularly property crime. Property crime and drug addiction go hand in hand.
Yeah. What do you think was the reason that the whole system did change, that the whole corrections, law enforcement system did change, that to bring about this recognition?
Where we're at today, or back in the 90s when the Measure 11 stuff started?
Well, what was the transition? What was the reason that things changed? That we had this sort of what I would describe as, tough on crime rhetoric from leaders in the 90s, and then you fast forward 30 years and things are different. That law enforcement corrections is recognizing that the crime problem is related to the drug addiction problem.
I would say, again, in just my opinion, I would say we didn't know what we didn't know back then, and I think the laws weren't targeted to incarcerate the average drug user that was a person drug user on the street. That's who you saw was affected by a lot of those laws. I think they were trying to get drugs off the street, and the tough on crime piece was trying to crack down on that. And I think a population of people ended up going to prison. Lots of drug addicts have ended up with many years in prison because of their addictions. I think we've learned over time with those laws that got passed and where we're at today, if you treat the drug addiction, maybe less people end up in the system going to prison.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. And not only thank you for that personal observation, but also for all your great work. And thanks so much for your role and all of the people in the Sheriff's Office role in getting this grant. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for all your many years of service as you come down to the end.
Commissioner Burney.
Oh, I just want to say thank you both. No, I would like to say that Captain Riley, and I mean this with all sincerity, every time I hear you present, it's fascinating because, you're the head of the jail and you have a heart to, as I view it, as to more comprehensive reform given the realities of the current situation. And I think it would behoove many people who are concerned with either public safety and security or police enforcement of that to understand that here in Lane County, we have a system that is trying its hardest to provide treatment instead of jail to those for whom treatment could deter them from jail. And even now in jail, rather than have a bunch of artificial barriers precluding you from providing that treatment and that assistance, you've been pretty aggressive to be able to find the resources to, in fact, right that wrong. So kudos, and I absolutely support this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I'll just add, I appreciate how our Lane County Sheriff's Office is always on the cutting edge of trying new ways to serve the population that's coming in and out of the jail system, and people out there that you're trying to help day to day. Grants like this really help elevate that and prove to the broader community that we can do things differently, and it really does actually help the community. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the resolution in order 20-12-15-06 as presented.
I move approval.
Oh, I've got Commissioner Sorensen, and so I'll do Commissioner Sorensen move and Commissioner Bozovich second. Any discussion? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Buck. And Captain Riley, it has to be very rewarding for you to see this kind of a grant be approved. And I wanted to commend you for your monthly work with the Mental Health Summit, which is focused on keeping people in treatment and out of jail in jail diversion. Thank you for that work. And thank you for bringing us to this point, Captain Riley.
Thank you, sir.
Any further discussion? I don't see any, so I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. So we will move on to our next item, which is 9B, Resolution and Order 20-12-15-07 in the matter of accepting a 4-year Juvenile Drug Treatment Court Enhancement Grant Award through the Bureau of Justice Assistance in the amount of $600,000 for the Lane County Juvenile Treatment Court, delegating authority to the county administrator to execute the award documents and associated subcontracts, and increasing fiscal year 2021 appropriations in the Special Revenue Fund within the Department of Public Safety in the amount of $200,000. And with us is Debbie Holler, Fiscal Manager.
Good morning, Chair Buck and Commissioners. I am just going to introduce Caitlin and Joe from the treatment courts, and then I'm going to let them talk to you because this is really their grant. So we have Caitlin Richards, she's the coordinator for the juvenile treatment court, and then Joe Vigil, who is the senior coordinator, kind of overseeing all of the Lane County treatment courts.
Good morning, Chair Buck and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you this morning. My name is Caitlin Richards, and I'm the Juvenile Treatment Court Coordinator for Lane County. With me today is Joe Vigil. He's the Senior Treatment Court Coordinator for Lane County. We would like to take this opportunity to present to you the grant that the Lane County Juvenile Rep Court Program has been awarded from the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, or the OJJDP, through the Lane County Sheriff's Office. Juvenile Treatment Court has been in operation since the early 1990s. In that time, the treatment court has successfully served countless families and youth. Previously, the RAP Court program was held and ran by the Department of Youth Services. The Oregon Judicial Department has added a juvenile treatment court coordinator and has taken over operation of the RAP Court program, which not only adds improvements to the juvenile treatment court, but also aligns with best practices for treatment courts. This position is now the third coordinator position held at the Lane County Circuit Court, and it is part of a specialty court coordinator team with the Lane County Circuit Court. With the transition of an OJD coordinator taking over operations of juvenile treatment court, fiscal responsibilities will now be held by the Lane County Sheriff's Office, so that all Lane County treatment court fiscal responsibilities are, so that the Lane County treatment courts and the Lane County Sheriff's Office can all be held in the same office. The Lane County Treatment Courts and the Lane County Sheriff's Office have a long-standing partnership with the adult treatment court programs, and with the support of the Lane County Sheriff, they now are a new partner with the Lane County Juvenile Treatment Court RAP program. This spring, the Juvenile Treatment Court applied for an Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention grant and was one of 7 to be awarded $600,000 for the next 4 years. The program previously held an OJJDP grant from 2014 to 2017. This grant will allow the Juvenile Treatment Court to treat youth with co-occurring issues and not just addressing substance use. Many, if not all, the youth who participate in treatment court struggle with co-occurring disorders and/or trauma. In order to successfully treat youth and ensure lasting sobriety, it's important for the program to address mental health as well as substance use. Currently, our team consists of the Deputy DA, a defense attorney, a substance use treatment provider, parole and probation, a judge, and the coordinator. The grant will allow for the program to add a qualified mental health provider to work one-on-one with the youth. In addition, it will allow for a psychiatrist to work with the youth and families as needed. OJJDP Juvenile Drug Treatment Court guidelines state that programs should work with providers who use treatment modalities proven to be effective with youth who have substance use issues. Modalities identified as best practice with youth included but are not limited to behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, family therapy, motivational enhancement therapy, or a combination of 2 or more of these. It is recommended that juvenile treatment courts refer their participants to substance abuse treatment programs that encompass these modalities and not the standard community services. To date, RAP Court has offered standard substance abuse treatment absent of a mental health component. This grant will allow the juvenile treatment court program to be in line with the juvenile drug treatment court guidelines. Additionally, this grant will allow funding to secure a provider to administer random observed UA 7 days a week to be in line with the Oregon specialty court standards. To date, substance use monitoring, or UAs, has not been observed, random, or offered 7 days a week. The result of this is that participants are aware that if they drink or use on a Friday evening, they will not be tested again until Monday and then continue to use through the duration of the program. In addition, funding from this grant will also allow for travel and training of team members at the National Association of Drug Court Professionals Conference, as well as access to free technical assistance for the duration of the grant. We're excited to bring this opportunity to the youth and families of Lane County and welcome any questions. And thank you.
Thank you so much. Any comments or questions for our presenters today? Commissioner Postovich.
Thank you. So I've attended a lot of the treatment court graduations for adults, but I haven't had the chance to attend graduation for juveniles. But I consistently hear a similar story in the adult treatment courts, that had they not been arrested and charged and then offered the diversion in the treatment court, they never would have gone and sought help for their addiction on their own. That the event that actually got them on, well again, was the actual criminal arrest and charges that led to the diversion into a treatment court. And you also, would hear family members talk about the exact same thing, how they had lost their brother, sister, mother, son, whatever family member, and they didn't think they were ever going to get them back, and then they were diverted into treatment court, and it made a huge difference. Is that a similar situation with juveniles, where they really would not have checked into treatment or participated in treatment in any way without having that diversion from a criminal charge kind of hanging over their head, that if they didn't finish their program, they'd end up serving a sentence for a criminal charge? Is that a similar story that you hear from treatment court graduates at juvenile level?
I think yes. So I think more what's looming over their head is the fact that they get to have some of their charges expunged. Getting that charge taken away is huge for them. I can give an example of a kid this year who really wanted to go into the military. And with that charge, he is not allowed to actually enlist. And so completing the RAP Court program, oftentimes they can work with the deputy DA to have that charge then expunged, so that way he would be able to go into to the military. I will say in his case, he was not actually granted that chance of it being expunged. However, he was super eager to still complete the program, even though he wasn't going to get that charge expunged. Normally, most youth, if they get that taken away or they don't have that opportunity, sometimes it's not as appealing for them. But I think Lane County is a little bit special in that fact that it is our Department of Youth Services and the court is so backed and behind the juvenile treatment court program that they really encourage you to take a look at it, and they really speak highly of it. That youth, although they really want those charges expunged, it's not always the underlying factor. Sometimes it's more just completing the program and getting clean and sober.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Buck, and I'll be very brief. This is a part of a multi-pronged approach that Lane County Board of Commissioners and Lane County supports in alternate court programs that, once again, as I mentioned earlier to Captain Riley, and I'll mention it again to you, Ms. Haller, thank you for your participation in the Mental Health Summit and helping us divert people from jail and into treatment. This is one of the great examples of the work that we do here in Lane County. Thank you.
Commissioner Burney.
Thank you for allowing me to speak, Chair. I know you are going to. Caitlin, I just wanted, as someone who way back in 1978 was an employee of an OJDDP grant, I listened to you keenly, and I just think that the value of securing this resource for our community is huge. My hat's off to you. Absolutely support it. And thank you so much I was fascinated with your answer to Commissioner Bozovich's question. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm super excited. This is my first time with a grant. And I am so excited to see how far it's going to go. And I have huge expectations for our team and where this is going to take us. And especially for these youth and families who really, I think, really need this mental health support, especially right now with COVID and being home and stuck. We're seeing families really struggle, and being able to have that added component, I think, is really going to help our youth and our families thrive.
Well, I implore that you keep those huge expectations because, as you well know, yes, you're correct. Even the amount of under-reporting that's going on now with young people and families, they're talking about a fourth wave of the pandemic, which has to do with young people sort of coming out into the world and going through whatever they've gone through. So again, my heartiest congratulations.
Thank you.
Any other comments or discussion? I too was going to add my congratulations. This is just another way in which the county is leaning forward and going in a direction to find alternatives for our community that are safe and divert people and kids, in this case, through any of our juvenile justice center more harsh punishments, which we know we all want to see something better for our kids. So thank you so much. I look forward to seeing how the outcomes from this grant proceed as it's rolled out. So with that, is there a motion to approve the resolution and order 20-12-15-07 as presented? Commissioner Berney.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Berney, second by Commissioner Sorensen. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much. And boy, these are really wonderful grants we just went through. So it looks like we are ready to go back to our holiday farm fire update. And with us is Mr. Mokrahewski again and Dan Hurley, our Public Works Director.
Okay, Chair, thank you for your patience. And Dan is here and ready to provide an update on our wildfire recovery work.
Great. All right. I missed the first part of the conversation, so I'm not sure if you want me to zero in on the FEMA denial, Chair, or just give a general update. I can go either way.
Either or both. We haven't started in on this particular subject yet, so it's all yours.
Okay. I'll hit the highlights from the different areas then and also make sure I cover the FEMA denial. Thank you for that. So the big news for an update is that we have received the Red Cross data. We've been trying for months to get information on the individuals who've been sheltered in hotels, but there were significant legal challenges around that. But we do have that data now, so we're working with our folks internally who've been managing the data, and we'll be cross-referencing that with the information we have from folks who have applied for FEMA and information we have from our case management, so that we can find out who has or has not applied for assistance, and that'll help us with our outreach as well. So we're looking forward to digging into that. We've done significant work with land management to start working on issues to make things clearer for the building process. So we're working on tiny homes in particular to make sure that we're clarifying the process for that and getting more information on our website. On the human services side, Laurel O'Rourke is doing great work working through the multi-agency shelter transition team, meeting with individuals in conjunction with FEMA and ODHS to find out what people's options are. These are the most probably in need folks, people that aren't doing well in the hotels there and aren't otherwise qualifying for assistance. So we're helping those people on an individual basis seek out what are the documentation that they need to get some sort of assistance, and trying to put a plan in place for them. So she's met with, I think it's about 18 people doing that 3 days a week. And it's pretty time intensive doing that work. On the community social services side, the big focus is trying to set up our long-term recovery group. So this would be a community-led group where the county would assist, but it's the community's organizations coming together to triage requests and provide assistance in the different ways that they do. So we're happy to announce that the Lane County COAD, community organizations assisting in disaster, are willing to step up to be the sort of umbrella organization for the other nonprofits and faith communities that can assist in this effort. So we have a meeting, I think it's later today, to try to push that along and formalize that relationship. Also on the long-term recovery group effort, we are working on hiring our internal manager, our long-term disaster recovery manager. We had 11 applicants and we're currently scoring those, and we've heard that we have some great applicants in there, so we'll be going through the interview process and hopefully getting someone who will carry this project through the long term and be able to do more outreach up into the community. On the housing side, no current change since the FEMA denial, but we're still working on that piece. Alex Kyler has been working this issue intensively over the last week. He went up and visited the U.S. Basketball Academy and saw a lot of promise in that property. There are a lot of issues around the ownership of that. But FEMA is also interested. They sent a representative to take a look at that, and they're also bringing up someone from the Army Corps. So that's a good sign. I think that could still potentially pan out. FEMA is also doing an internal review of their decision. And there's word that we may be able to get 15 to 20 trailers. There have been I think over 80 trailers that arrived up into Jackson County as a staging area. Most of them are for Jackson County, but there's word that some of those might be heading north. So we're waiting to hear more on that. Alex Kyler is working to prepare a memo for the Office of Emergency Management so that they can appeal to FEMA. And we're going to be bringing up points that we think their housing analysis is insufficient. Alex is working with the cities to try to get some more information on the true availability and issues that folks are having trying to get housing in our area. Also focusing in on the high fatality rate of Highway 126, particularly in the winter, that we think having to drive 40 minutes to an hour up that dangerous road for people to work is not sufficient. So focusing on those two areas in that request, as well as the issue with the delay we had with the Red Cross data. Since we weren't able to get information on 183 people that are in the hotels, we don't really know what their needs are or if they fall into a category where they're going to need direct housing assistance. So we'll be working on preparing that memo to OEM over the next week to make sure that we hit any deadlines for an appeal. But there are some hints that FEMA may be revisiting their opinion and providing us some level of assistance. So those are the major updates. Continuing to work on lots of other issues, particularly around the watershed and environmental restoration. But I'll leave that there and subject to your questions, conclude my brief.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from commissioners? Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you. Dan, I was a little concerned because I heard a report from a constituent about a manufactured home that had been destroyed during the fire that was approved for siting back in the 90s was given approval that it was above the 100-year flood. And now the replacement on the same footprint with the same size home is being asked to supply a letter of map amendment from FEMA to site the home in the same place, same footprint, exactly where it was before. What's going on? Why are we asking somebody to go through thousands of dollars of process and months with FEMA to supply a letter of map amendment for something we approved previously as being outside the floodplain?
I'm not sure, Commissioner. I'll definitely look into that. If you can send me some information, we'll have our land management folks look into that. We're not trying to create obstacles for folks, but there may be, certain regulations that we're having to follow. But I'd like to look into that and find out. We can get you a response.
I appreciate it because I'm really concerned because, in that case, at least it was a house that existed after we had floodplain requirements. What's going to happen to some of these houses that were there, prior to us adopting our rural comprehensive plan and even having flood maps for the Mackenzie, that were built in the 70s. I just hope we're not throwing roadblocks in front of some of these replacements. And in this case, it seemed like a really easy way for somebody to get back on their property. So we don't need to have a trailer from FEMA. And somewhere along the line, it sounds like we're adding to that process and timeline. So okay. I appreciate a report back on that one. I'll try and I was just trying to find the email so I could forward it on to you. But it is a concern of mine to make sure that we're not adding process.
Sure. We'll look into that. We're trying to do the opposite. We're trying to make things easier for folks. So we are moving ahead with those positions that the board authorized. So we have 3 new positions coming in for LMD specifically to process permits on the fire. So we're just trying to make things more expedient, but I'll need to find out more on that specific issue.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Dan, I just have a few thoughts here. First, it's my understanding that in the new year, we will most likely go to a once-a-month update on the Holiday Farm fire. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair. That's what we had decided last meeting. If you can let me know if there's a specific week, if you want that at the beginning of the month or whatever works for you.
Well, I'm sure that will be up to the agenda team, so we'll talk about that. In addition to that, there was some pretty significant information that was shared at the SVMC Wildfire Response Council from Professor Doug Toomey from the U of O, who talked about a significant telecommunications infrastructure upgrade that was going on through not only Lane County, but in several of the fire affected areas. And I would really like to see if he could present a short report about what he's working on for that. I believe Congressman DeFazio is really instrumental in getting some pieces together to make sure that happens, and perhaps that can be done with the next Holiday Farm fire update if he's available.
Certainly, Chair. I'll reach out to him and try to schedule that. That would be good to cover. The telecommunications issue on this has been very fluid for the last several months as things have changed. So it would be good to get an update on that.
Right. Telecommunications upriver is so very challenging, and we did have some mobile units move out of the area recently, and it changes coverage access for folks up there. And we already know that they're struggling for 911 access and making sure that their kids have internet in order to continue their classes through next week. And I know that's an ever-moving, evolving, changing thing, but this particular presentation that he provided, Sarah Means has the contact information for that, was really significant in the fact that this could alleviate those kinds of concerns in future natural disasters.
Great. That's good to hear. I'll reach out to him through Sarah. Thank you.
And I'm also so pleased to hear that the Red Cross has been able to find a way in which to share information with the county while also preserving privacy requirements for those that are affected. That's a significant change. So very pleased to hear that. Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Chair. Two things. Since we're moving to a monthly, and Dan, I know you've got to be completely overwhelmed with everything that is hitting. But I looked at the materials for this section of the agenda, and there are none. And my request is that if we move to monthly, that perhaps something could be created, some kind of matrix, so that both we and the public can monitor on key indicators how things are going. Just a thought. I know we're not supposed to get into the weeds, but that would be helpful.
That would be a good idea.
I'm sorry?
Probably time to, I think that would be a good idea, Vice Chair. We have been providing a report for the weekly updates. When we came off the agenda, I told the person who was preparing those that we didn't have to have something for this week, but I think it's time to revisit that and put some metrics around it. I think that as we move to a monthly schedule, that would be a great idea.
Thank you, sir. And actually, this is to Mr. Mokrahysky. We always, the day or night before, get a similar report prior to a board meeting. We have been from Ms. Gaffney on COVID, and I'm going to suggest that material retroactively be placed as material in the agenda so the public also can view that and monitor it as time goes on, because there's also never material there, although we get it in advance. And my last question is really to Mr. Mokrahysky. Is there a status on the MOU between the county and United Way?
Chair and Commissioner Burney, we are meeting, I think we have a meeting scheduled with United Way in early January with county staff and United Way staff to draft that MOU. So it's in the works.
That's great. Thank you, sir. I just was curious because I didn't know the time frame. That makes sense. And I'm delighted that we are assessing and organizing data for an appeal to FEMA. So thank you so much for moving on that. Yet more workload, I understand. So thank you very much, Dan. Thank you, Chair.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, I don't see any, so thank you very much, Mr. Hurley. Appreciate the update. We'll move on to our agenda. Next up is County Council announcements.
Chair Buck and board, no specific announcements. I'm ready to start the FCIT report.
Okay.
I think
all right, then we'll just move straight to the report, which is the fatal crash investigation team report.
All right, and I believe Becky's going to get the slides up.
Can I be authorized to
one
share
moment, I'm working on that, Becky. I didn't know you would have slides. Hold on.
Thank you. Are you able to see the presentation?
Yes. Yes. All right. Good morning, board. As you know, the FCIT team was formed after the board adopted a transportation safety action plan in 2017 with an idea toward aligning enforcement, engineering, and public education, public health education staff across county departments to move us towards 0 deaths. The FCIT reports to you quarterly. This is the final report of the year. You need the next slide, Becky. Traffic fatalities continue to be a public health issue. As you can see from this data showing traffic deaths since 2016, on average, statewide, 486 people die in traffic crashes each year. Within Lane County, including all roads, state highways, and city streets, about 42 people die in traffic crashes each year. On Lane County roads alone, about 10 people die each year in traffic crashes. Next slide. In looking at the traffic fatalities on Lane County roads, we've determined that the risks for people walking are comparable to riding a motorcycle, with 21% of the fatalities being people walking and hit by a vehicle. This is the apparent trend of rising fatalities in the summer months and a larger increase in Lane County in August and September. This is an example of how data helps us make better decisions about how to target our efforts to make the greatest impact. There seems to be a lot more attention given to safety during the wintertime, but the data shows we need to focus safety education and enforcement during the summertime. And the majority of those crashes are roadway departure crashes where a vehicle drives off the road and typically hits a fixed object like a ditch embankment or a tree. As you can see from this graph, the leading contributing factors in fatality and severe injury collisions in Lane County are excessive speeds and intoxication. This is where we need to focus education and enforcement action to reduce fatalities and serious injuries. The Center for Disease Control has calculated medical costs and lost work costs from traffic deaths in Oregon per year to be about $412 million for people killed in vehicles, $108 million for people killed on motorcycles, $118 million for people killed while walking, and $9 million for people killed while riding a bike. The CDC estimates the total cost of traffic deaths in Oregon to be $640 million a year. As noted on this slide prepared by the CDC, motor vehicle crash deaths are costly but preventable. This is the focus of FCIP prevention. Knowing that most of the fatal and severe injury crashes involve roadway departures, Public Works continues to include rumble strips as part of pavement preservation work. Rumble strips are a road safety feature involving pavement indentations that cause tactile vibration and audible rumbling when driven over to alert drivers of potential danger. They've proven to reduce about 30% of the fatal and severe injury collisions. Again, we're trying to make the most of our limited resources. Our limited road fund is prioritized towards maintenance and preservation. Rumble strips are a relatively low-cost safety measure that we incorporate into preservation work. As you can see in this slide, 7 county roads have received centerline rumble strips with pavement overlays. We began this work in 2017 to implement the actions recommended by our Transportation Safety Action Plan. But as you can see, our resource limitations enable us to only do a few roads per year. Thanks to grant funding provided by the Oregon Department of Transportation, we've been supporting efforts to provide rural youth with walking, biking, and driving safety education. In this slide, you can see a youth in the city of Lowell sporting a new helmet from a donation and education event held this summer. There are important programs that we need to support to not only protect our most vulnerable populations, but to work to improve the safety culture for future generations. And at this point, I believe I'm turning the presentation over to the Chief Deputy.
Good morning, Commissioners. As you read this particular slide, I'm going to have to assume that you receive these kind of comments from your constituents on a regular basis. I know that we at the Sheriff's Office hear similar concerns about speeding and other risky behaviors that we have to deal with in law enforcement. This resident says that he rarely sees law enforcement except after an incident, and that's a reality for us. I will later explain our resource constraints, but as we go forward, this constituent also raised an issue that a lot of people are unaware of. The assumption that ticketing could pay an officer's wage for a year in just a few days is incorrect. The truth is that we have so few deputies that we're constantly responding to calls and there's a lack of time for proactive traffic enforcement. There are changes at the state level, such as the majority of citation revenue now goes to the state, and we only get a portion of that revenue. That was an action by state legislatures to curb law enforcement from deriving revenue from what was perceived as speed traps. Many people may not know that Lane County doesn't have a traffic patrol team as we had in the past. It was cut several years ago with budget cuts and staff reductions. At that time, the public wanted officers fighting what they called real crimes and not traffic citations or generating traffic citations. If the board is receiving more comments like this one, then perhaps the perspective on the value of traffic enforcement is changing. Next slide, please. This is kind of a slide to kind of do a comparison to things that are going on in the quote unquote real crimes versus what happens during crashes. The slide is about building an appreciation for the value of traffic enforcement and saving lives. These are national statistics from the National Traffic Highway Safety Administration, and they show the impacts of crashes. One person dies every 16 minutes in a crash, compared to one murder every 36 minutes, and so on and so forth. Commissioners, I think you guys have seen this slide a couple times in the past, but this is just to, again, reillustrate the fact that the Sheriff's Office is completely understaffed compared to both the national average and the Oregon State Sheriff's Office Association average. You may have heard that Lane County doesn't have a traffic problem. That translates to we have too few officers to proactively patrol. We essentially have an emergency response force. The reality is that we have too few deputies when you compare our ratios to both the national average and the state sheriff's average. We lack the capacity to enforce proactively and prevent fatal crashes. This is a slide we developed just to kind of show you a 5-year average and the amount of citations that the Sheriff's Office has written. In 2018, we were able to intervene on some traffic violations and issue a total of 3,800, almost 3,900 citations. In 2019 and year 20, the number of traffic citations taper off significantly. As you just learned from the earlier crash data presentation, this drop in citations isn't because fewer people are violating traffic safety laws. It's a reflection of our limited resources, which are increasingly being pulled away from traffic patrol duties to respond to emergencies and other calls for services. The issue the FCID is emphasizing is that traffic fatality should be a high priority because there are too many preventable deaths happening on our roads. For more accurate perspective on what the normal traffic citation volume between 2005 and 2009, we averaged 24,826 citations a year. We're doing what we can with what we've got. On the education front, we've implemented yard signs to program and encourage people to drive slower through neighborhood streets. We've implemented the speed reduction signs. On the engineering front, we've deployed the speed feedback signs, but we lack the resources as an enforcement program that prioritizes crash intervention. The Sheriff's Office has part of the three-legged stool for crash reduction is obviously the weakest leg. The Sheriff's Office pursues grants for targeted enforcement activities, but those only cover overtime hours of existing officers. It doesn't allow for hiring of new deputies. So it's just effectively just squeezing more out of what few resources we have, and it's not sustainable or effective in producing the behavior change we need to create on our rural roadways. If we're really going to make a difference and reduce the number of fatal and severe injury crashes, I know that the board has asked about automated enforcement in the past, and SFIT has been doing a lot of research to try to figure out what it would take for us to use that technology. What we've learned from other communities using speed cameras is that we need to have additional resources to manage and implement the program. And there's an impact on the courts with increased citations that we'll need to be able to talk through with them to accommodate. In short, there's no easy solution or quick fix. We need more resources, and we know that there are limited resources and other competing priorities. If reducing traffic-related deaths is a priority, we need to figure out a better resource for traffic enforcement so we can achieve our goal of 0 deaths on the highways. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the board?
Commissioner Brozovich.
Thank you, Chair Buck. Chief Deputy, you put up a chart of average, the citations per year, but I think that doesn't really show the whole story. weren't we writing somewhere close to 20,000 a year back in the early 2000s versus the 3,000 a year in the last 5 years? I thought I remember seeing some statistic about that in an earlier presentation from the FSIT. But do you have any idea how far we've dropped off from, before the loss of secure rural schools and a lot of the funding we used to have supporting the sheriff's office, and also the changes in fee structure that the state legislature made in the around 2010 that really hurt the traffic team?
To answer your question, Commissioner, yes, I do have those numbers, at least an average from 2005 to 2009. We averaged 24,826 citations a year. During that time frame, we did have a traffic safety enforcement team, which I was part of. And without that, there's, our criminal patrol deputies just don't have the unallocated time to do traffic enforcement. Their time is spent going from call to call to call, or doing the follow-up and writing the reports that are required with those calls. So we're currently at almost 2,200 citations for the year, compared to almost 25,000 citations just 15 years ago, or 11 years ago.
Yeah, and probably Commissioner Sorensen and I are the only commissioners that have been here long enough to remember us having to dismantle our justice court system down to a single court as we lost our ability to collect fines from traffic citations that supported the courts when the state legislature did a big sweep of traffic fines, and also created a law where the first $60 of any fine collected, because quite often we don't collect all the fines we issue, went to the state and put them first in priority as to who gets the money. And that all happened in the legislature right as I came on as a commissioner that year. And we had to go from 3 justice courts down to 2, which speaks to the issue if we did add, this automated traffic enforcement, where the ticket's going to go to, because our only existing justice court now is in Florence. And that doesn't help people that maybe get a ticket from Oak Ridge very much. And, the fact that we can't, the way the fee structure was redesignated, we can't support the traffic team like we used to with the fine revenues. It's just not, it's not possible. I don't believe under that change in the fine structure. So we're kind of in a really tough spot where, the state's kind of swept up some of our fines, prevented us from adding fees to those citations to support the local infrastructure of courts, et cetera. And then, how do we deal with this? Because enforcement is by far one of the most effective tools in changing behavior. Any thoughts at all about how we move ahead under or do we need to go back to the legislature and ask them to go backwards on what they did in 2010?
Well, I think if we're ever going to try to go back to the same system we had before with the justice court system, there's obviously going to have to be some legislative changes. But at the same time, I think that people out there know that they're just not very likely to get a citation like they once were. I remember a time where people talked about that they needed to slow down because they realized they were coming into Lane County, and that's just not the case now. So I think people are actually surprised when they receive a citation from a deputy nowadays.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Burney.
Chief Deputy, thank you for the report. And thank you, Mr. Dingle. You had a slide and forgive me, I wrote it down, but I couldn't resurrect it in our materials. A slide that was national statistics on deaths by crime comparing to deaths by crashes and traffic accidents. And as I don't know if it's possible to put that on the screen, but whether it is or not, oh, apparently it is. As that's here. There you go. Thank you so much. By the way, Chief Deputy, I was impressed that you did that while shuffling paper. I know you didn't do it. My question is there any data like this available that's Lane County specific?
I don't think we have those analytics currently, Commissioner, but I know that our goal is to start being able to use Tableau and other softwares to start trying to create more of this information.
That makes sense, and I thank you, sir. It's gonna, in that we seem to be between a rock and a hard place at this moment in this regard, it will be interesting to be able to look at this data because, forgive the pun, but that's another place, right, where the rubber hits the road, and we're really seeing the impacts of a lack of enforcement capacity. Thank you, sir.
Any comments or questions?
Chair Buck and board, there is one thing I did want to, which just happened recently that I think reinforces the value of this group. We sent a letter in support of our objection to FEMA's decision to say that they don't need to pay, or it focused on that it was easy to commute from the Blue River area and that those folks could make the commute. Now I just sent a letter at the request of Alex Kyler in support of our objection, and that was based on data and work that the FCIT team had done.
Appreciate that. Hopefully that will help in our appeal. There was also a slide in the beginning of how many crashes we've seen this year from Lane County, state, and national. And if I remember right, we're down a few, which is wonderful news. And was wondering if you felt like that was due to any particular safety protocols we had or just ongoing cumulative work. And, you know, knock on wood, we're not done with the year yet, right? And people maybe out and about still driving around, and we hope they're safe. But I was curious if you felt the downward trend for 2020, even though we're missing a month, was due to anything specific.
I think like any year, 2020 has got a lot of variables to it, to include greater vehicle safety as manufacturers, great improvements by our local roads teams and engineering teams, and there's been mixed information about whether or not 2020's created less driving or more driving, while at the same time thinking that people are actually driving more dangerously when they're out and about driving. So I don't know that there's any one thing that you can point to, Commissioner.
Yeah, I concur with the Chief Deputy. That's what we've seen so far, is this mixed result where intuitively you might think that people are driving less because of the pandemic, or maybe they're driving more, but there seems to be some data that suggests they're not driving as safely.
I noticed that as well. We were commenting, my family and I were commenting about it during the summertime, that we felt like people were just on edge and a little bit more angry. But then perhaps it was countered by people not driving as much. Just curious of the evidence, though, of that. I saw Commissioner Bozovich's hand and then Commissioner Berney.
I was just going to note that vehicle miles traveled is down overall across the state based on the sale of gasoline and gas tax receipts coming into the state being down. So there is less travel during COVID. But because of that, speeds on roads have actually gone up, and we're seeing more dangerous driving behaviors because the lack of congestion leads to higher speeds. So it's sort of a double-edged sword of how COVID's impacted those numbers. But I think overall, the increase in vehicle safety and some of the other issues may have brought some of those numbers down, but we're also seeing a significant reduction in vehicle miles traveled total overall in the state.
Commissioner Burney.
Well, I was going to make a point and a question. Commissioner Bozovich made the point more eloquently than I, and I don't appreciate that, but he did. The question, and by the way, this is not just as it relates to this type of data. I'm aware and semi-involved in a fairly large development potential. And one of the questions that was asked by the developers was for a feasibility. And feasibilities have just gone out the window with some developments as a result of 2020. Chief Deputy, my last question, it's a data question. There was another slide you provided, I'm sorry I didn't get to this the first time, that talked about I believe, motor vehicle crash costs. I think the chart identified about $70 million for the state of Oregon. And my recollection is, oh, there you go, 700 million. And obviously the bulk of that is work loss costs, and a chunk of it is medical. Are there any comparators for other states? So we can kind of see where that falls in nationally.
I don't have that in front of me, but obviously this is a CDC
right.
information, and I believe that CDC does a breakdown state by state.
Hey, if it wouldn't be too much trouble, Mr. Dingle, maybe next report we could compare this with other states. That'd be great. Thank you, Chief Deputy. Sorry to keep asking you data questions.
We can do that, Chair Buck, Commissioner Burney, we can certainly do that for our next presentation.
Any final comments, questions? I don't see any, so thank you very much for the presentation. Appreciate it. We have no executive session for today, but I thought since we have a little bit of time before noon, we would ask our county administrator if there are any announcements.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple, I had one item and then a couple of thank yous I wanted to offer. First, last week, Commissioner Farr brought up some questions and I think concerns about camping that's occurring, particularly in, it's occurring all over our county in both incorporated and unincorporated areas. There is a camp on West, I believe on West 11th, and I wanted to just follow up on that discussion. We've had several discussions, and there's ongoing work between our Health and Human Services staff and our Public Works staff. There has been and will continue to be support provided related to sanitation, waste disposal, and behavioral issues. We have taken the approach of not breaking the camp up. I think as we've talked about with the board, given public health concerns and really guidance and recommendation from the CDC and our public health officials to where possible, if we're able to not break up those camps, it is preferable, particularly during this pandemic that we're dealing with. So, but we recognize that there are impacts on the community, on surrounding neighbors and businesses there. And so we will continue to both monitor and provide support and resources as necessary to manage that area. Welcome feedback from commissioners and engagement on that. I know that, and I'll just say, I think we're all aware that this is a challenging time. I mean, we have been dealing with a housing crisis in our community. COVID has further exacerbated that challenge and the impact on people that were already on the margins. And so we're mindful of that, the sort of growing challenge. Of course, Lane County and its partners have been, I think, as aggressive as we can be with the limited resources that we have available at going after state and federal funds, at leveraging those resources to both acquire properties and renovate properties and identify solutions, both to meet the immediate needs and the long-term needs. We know that those solutions are not enough to address the current challenges that we face, but we will continue to do what we can do to respond to those issues. Shifting gears, I wanted to just offer a couple of thank yous. First to Commissioner Sorensen. You made comments under remonstrances earlier, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you for the nearly 6.5, almost 7 years that I've been here. Commissioner Farr reflected on his experience and Commissioner Sorensen calling him when he was elected to an office, and I had a similar experience. Commissioner Farr was the chair of the board when I was hired into this role and called me to offer the position. And then after the board, there was this negotiation period back and forth, and after we reached agreement, and I think actually when the board had voted on my contract, I was in my office in my prior employer's office, and my assistant came back and said, "There's someone on the phone for you from Lane County, a commissioner from Lane County." I said, "Okay." So I picked it up, and it was Commissioner Sorensen, who was, after the board voted, the first to call me and say congratulations and look forward to working with you. Of course, I had met Commissioner Sorensen during the interview process, so we'd become acquainted there. But I always appreciated that, and have one of the things that Commissioner Sorensen has been very passionate and drilled into me is the need for equity in the relationship between the administrator and all 5 commissioners. I also have felt very strongly about this, that it's not a count to 3 kind of thing, that really the success of a public sector organization with a council manager form of government, where you have an elected board that appoints an executive to run the day-to-day operations, is really important that all 5 elected members of the governing body have a positive working relationship with their appointed executive. And at any point that the relationship between the appointed executive and any one individual commissioner starts to fall apart, that becomes a really problematic situation. Commissioner Sorensen has from the beginning been very and I will say, held me accountable at times where, he has maybe felt like or questioned those things. And I have, for this period of time that I've been here, maintained regular meetings with each commissioner and made sure that we have good communication and equitable time is spent with each commissioner. I think some of that was informed by past challenges that this organization has experienced. And so I've always really appreciated that perspective of the role of the board, the role of all 5 commissioners as part of the board, regardless of who is in the majority or the minority, that each commissioner is elected to serve. And the administrator is responsible for treating all 5 of you equally in that regard, and then following the direction of the majority of the board. So I just wanted to take a moment to recognize that and say how important I think that is fundamentally for a local government to operate functionally and at a high level. And we talk about kind of nonpartisan at the local level. We are the most nonpartisan of any level of government. You're not elected. While you may have political parties that you're affiliated with, you're not elected solely in that manner. And so I just wanted to thank Commissioner Sorensen for that perspective and for always being a supporter. He has always supported me, even though he's challenged me and pushed on issues over the time that I've been here. He's always supported the work that I've done and the work that our staff has done. So I will miss working with you personally, Commissioner Sorensen, and professionally, and wish you all the best in your well-deserved retirement, and look forward to working with you in the future. I also wanted to, while this person is not retiring and leaving us, I wanted to just, as this is the last business meeting of the board, I also wanted to recognize someone who does a lot of work behind the scenes and is not noticed, other than her voice sometimes during our board meetings is noticed by the public now in this past year. But, you know, we have had at least 50 board meetings, and these are just the regular Tuesday meetings and then Wednesday work sessions occasionally. And then your evening public comment sessions that you've added in the last couple years. We've had at least 50 of those, add on a number of joint elected official meetings and other things. And we have one person that coordinates all of that work, coordinates the schedules, coordinates all the materials that have to come from our departments, posts the agendas every week and posts those materials. It is like herding cats, if you will. And Diana Jones, who is our board coordinator, just does a phenomenal job as a one-person shop to really coordinate all of that. And then in this last year, as everyone has had to adjust to how they do their work, we of course have adjusted from in-person board meetings in Harris Hall. Remember, we used to do that? We used to be in Harris Hall every Tuesday. And yeah, and we would see each other, and we very quickly had to pivot that, as everyone has. And that has required Diana and her work in coordinating these efforts to move all of that. And so then facilitating, we do public comment here, and, you know, timing people and all of those little things that I know I oftentimes take for granted. Many of us take those things for granted, because Diana's always there and she's always stepping up and making sure that things go smoothly. And rarely do things not go smoothly. And then we recognize, oh no, where's Diana? And we need her. And so I just wanted to take a moment there to thank Diana for all of those meetings, all that behind the scenes work to make this challenging year, as it relates particularly to board meetings, really successful. Thank you, Diana, for your work. And that's all, Chair, unless you have questions for me.
Well, thank you very much. Those are some good announcements. And as the year wraps down, I just so appreciate working with Commissioner Sorensen as well as Diana Jones. She's kept me on track as your chair all year. She has such pride in her work and wants, you know, everything just to go off perfectly. And for the most part, our meetings are pretty darn smooth. She works on weekends, she works on holidays. She deserves that recognition. And Commissioner Sorensen, I will save my comments for the first meeting in the next year for you. Any other comments or questions for announcements today? Any other business for this morning? I think I'll bring up one other business item rather than waiting till the afternoon. Commissioner Bozovich and myself were doing interviews for our new planning commissioner, interviewees. We did those on Friday. We had 3 folks, one of which we agreed on. It was really, really challenging on the other 2 as to which to agree on. And Commissioner Bozovich had a previous relationship with both those other individuals. And so we thought it best that we have perhaps a second interview with those other 2 individuals by another commissioner that perhaps doesn't know them, to get through the process and appoint our final planning commissioner. So we were looking at Vice Chair Burney as a possibility, as someone whom probably I didn't know any of the interviewees. So, but we're hoping that Commissioner Burney, if he doesn't know these individuals, would be willing to do a second interview. If you know them, then perhaps maybe our incoming commissioner may not know them and could do the second interview. So we wanted to propose that so that they can continue moving forward. Commissioner Bozich, did I leave anything out?
No, and we purposely are not stating our opinions about the two interviewees because we want to make sure we get a unbiased recommendation from the vice chair or whoever does those follow-up interviews. And of course, these aren't the actual appointments. It's who we're going to be recommending to the full board. And we didn't want to make this a majority involved in it outside of a public meeting. So we're just asking that somebody else interview the other two people. We couldn't make a decision between the two of us as to who to recommend. So we've got one person being recommended for one of the two positions. And we're hoping we can get another party's opinion as to who to recommend between the other two.
Commissioner Burney.
I want everyone to know this is the first time I've ever heard this. So now I have a greater understanding of why Mr. Mokrahysky and his staff don't like surprises. Since I don't know who, I'm more than willing to do that. I'm honored that two of our commissioners would choose me to do this. I don't know who the people are, so I don't know if I know them or not. That's all I can say.
Well, we hate to surprise you, but it's also something that we can't talk about unless we're in a public meeting, right? So that makes it challenging. The two individuals that we're having a hard time deciding about is David Lovell and Christian Whittle. And if you know them, then maybe the incoming chair or the incoming commissioner.
I consider myself friends with one of them. Is that a problem?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
So why don't we, we're trying to get an unbiased opinion for the rest of the board to recommend. So why don't we check in with Commissioner-elect Lori Traeger, and then we can go from there. Okay. Any other business for today or this morning? I'll ask again this afternoon. All right. I don't see any. So we are in recess until 1:30. Thank you.